Now that post was threaded. If I find a screw the right size to start in there, will that do it, or I want one in between? Oh, that'll do it. I use different sizes at different times. But basically what I've done is put a screw in there so I've got a handle so I can lift that out or push it further in. The actual lock screw is here. There's no threaded adjustment for that position. You have to manually push it in or out. And I'll check through the finder and see how that image looks. It could well be, could be good, or it could be miles away. Well, I can tell that the images don't come to infinity, which suggests to me that the prism, the mirror is not close enough. Let's try pushing that in slightly. First I've got to get this lock screw loosened. It's awkward. Let's try that. With luck I'll hit it first time. Not quite. Not quite, but pretty close. I'm just allowing that to go in slightly, raising the mirror. Now I want more than that. There may have been a graduated adjustment tool for doing that in the factory. Of course I don't have one. Yeah, that's it, I think. That looks good. Just check that my lock screw is done up. And check that again. I'm using an infinity target here. I've got a good one outside the window. Now that might need to come back out slightly actually looking at that. So let's just make an adjustment. Sometimes when you do a lock screw up in a situation like this, it actually changes the settings slightly. Oh, it's slightly the other way now. It's a very fine adjustment. It is just a matter of going to and fro with your adjustments. The amount I'm moving that mirror is very, very slight. That's good. That'll do, mate. Yep, I'm happy with that. Okay, at the base of the camera, we can close this up. Why is this camera not focusing well? Right, we'll just deal to the base of this camera now, I suppose. What have I got to go on here? Well, we've got the base plate, the trim, that'll need to be cleaned. I've got the screws are there. Of course, the film advance lever's got to come off, and so is the temporary base that I put on there. Alright, well I'll clean this piece and we'll put it in place. Easy. Well, I did say easy, but it's proving to be anything but. See if I can get this old adhesive and remains of the leatherette loose. I'd like this to be nice and clean before I glue the leatherette back, so that the leatherette lies nice and flat. But this muck has other ideas. That's quite solid, some of this glue and leatherette amalgam. Yes, I'm afraid a toothpick was just a little bit too soft to encourage that loose. Using naphtha on this would be a waste of time. It wouldn't soften that hardened stuff up at all. Here I'm using CRC heavy duty Lectra clean, and what won't come off with this I'll probably remove with acetone. Bring you back when I've succeeded. Okay, here we go, making sure that that spring is in place. And you may well wonder how I got it as clean as that, but the answer was that I cleaned it with CRC Lectra Clean. That didn't really get rid of all the lumps. I cleaned it with acetone and that did a pretty good job on what was left, but not stunning. So I put it through the ultrasonic cleaner and that did remove all the residual rubbish. There's not an awful lot more to do here except put the leatherettes back on the camera. Right, that's all the screws in position. I'll go around and tighten them up. That's good. The leatherette for the base is here. Now you'll notice it's still got one of the little aluminium patches sitting on there. That's because it's lifted off with the leatherette. Those two little patches sit here, and it's to stop the leatherette. It's to bridge those holes basically so the leatherette doesn't form a hollow there. So, some adhesive. First I'll put this little patch in place. And then I'll apply some leather adhesive to the leatherette for the base. Now the leatherette for the base, I haven't scraped that. I have just wiped that down with a bit of naphtha on a cotton bud to make sure it's completely free of grease or anything that would prevent it from sticking down firmly. It looks fine. Let's get that off. Fit it in place. Points to watch are the leatherette around that button in particular, to make sure that it's firmly pressed down and not sticking to the button. And make sure the leatherette's seated round this boss in the centre, because leatherettes shrink and so they don't want to go down neatly around raised bosses. So make sure it is settled there. Likewise around the rewind button. Any excess on the surface usually will just rub away with your fingers at this stage while the adhesive is still relatively soft. There we go. That's our leatherette on the base of the camera. I don't like the fit there. I don't think that little aluminium patch might have shifted on me. Let me see if I can lift the leatherette there and have a look. Yes, I think I've done something dumb there. I think I've patched the wrong hole. Let's just peel that off. Separate these two little patches that I've managed to glue together. Solvent will help. That's it. Now back as we were. Bit of glue. There. There. And a little fresh coat of adhesive here. Everything's wanting to stick because this is contact adhesive, so it's half dry, so it'll be sticking to my fingers and anything else that's handy. Let's just put a little bit on there and spread it about. That's what we want. Back where we were. Deja vu. That's it. And this time the leatherettes do lay flat because I haven't got two patches on top of each other. Make sure that's stuck down firmly there, because underneath the advanced lever it's difficult to come back and look at that. Alright, one screw, two screws, three screws, and then up tight. Leatherette patch, Try and get the grain of this running the same way. That looks good. I'll zoom you out a bit. Before I put the leatherettes on the front, I'll get the back catch release cover back in place. Let's prop this up on something so you can see what's happening here. That'll do. Right. Take the cover, put that in there. Feed one of the two screws up through there. This is in the longer of the two slots. Here's the return spring for it. I'm going to fit that into place between the screw. There's a tiny protrusion on that tag which immediately flew apart. Let's have another go. If the spring is stretched and has too much tension, it wants to pop apart. If the spring is slack and has too little tension, it wants to pop apart. There I have it together. Well, I did for about 30 seconds. This is one of those awkward jobs that there is no easy way of doing it. Yeah, that was lucky I got that on there. That really didn't want to go over the tripod socket. Now when that happens, and it must have happened in this case, it's a result of someone screwing a tripod screw in there that was, I don't think you'd say that the thread was oversized, but probably it tapered a bit. Particularly down towards the base, it was probably not fully cut, and basically when it was screwed in here it stretched bell mouths out that tripod sockets there, which means that getting this cover back over that stretched tripod socket is very difficult, and in the struggle almost inevitably you end up with the spring popping away and you having to have another go at it again. Right, well that's the base of the camera dealt with. The top of the camera is dealt with. We've just got the leatherettes for the front of the camera, and as with the leatherette for the base, I have cleaned them, but I haven't scraped them back. They don't appear to need it, and I'm not looking for trouble. So I've cleaned them down with naphtha and removed anything that might have caused them to fail to adhere properly. Usually what you're concerned with there is oil or grease. Sometimes if people have polished the camera with some liquid polish, it might have soaked through the leatherette and left the leatherette in a greasy state where it won't accept adhesive readily, but that would be fairly unusual. Right, get the leatherette in place. The tricky bit's getting this over that flash boss, getting it square with the body, getting it pressed down neatly. Likewise, it needs to fit down into the recess there. That looks good. And tucks down in against the hinge at this end. Again, it's just a case of making sure it's pressed down firmly, really, particularly around that flash boss, because the leatherette will be shrunk and it won't want to go back over there. That looks good. One more to go. The adhesive I'm using is something called ADOS F2. It's designed as a contact cement. It's good for using, typically used for gluing fabric, leather, rubber, things like that. It's not a modern adhesive by any means. It's been on the market here for 50 years to my certain knowledge, probably much longer than that. It's probably a New Zealand product. I don't even know whether it's something you'd see in Australia. There will be equivalents in other markets, but I couldn't tell you offhand what they're likely to be, because probably I'm not familiar with them because they don't sell them here. As I say, it's designed to be used as a contact adhesive, so normally with contact adhesives you apply it to both surfaces. You wait until it reaches the tacky stage and then you press the two pieces firmly together. If you were to try and do that with this, you would find it very troublesome indeed, because you'd have no ability to push the leatherette into place, because inevitably you can't line things up perfectly at the first attempt. You need to be able to shift them slightly. So I apply the adhesive to one surface, always the leatherette, never the camera, and then apply it, then stick it on the camera. If everything's clean and dry, it'll be good. Right, here's the camera. The camera body's all serviced now, that's all good. Breathe a sigh of relief with that. But I want to service this lens, and then I've got another standard lens for this camera to service as well. This is the 50mm f 1.9. I've got the 50mm f 2.8 Xenar to service as well. So I'll clear the decks and I'll do that lens. Well, who didn't tell me that I hadn't put that little cover in place? Just discovered that. I better put it in. And put my leatherette back.